try and support local United Church congregations in the east half of the city to get more involved in this kind of stuff. So to find ways to systemically address the issues, which is a piece of our faith, but often our faith has had us focus on the service and the charity side of things, and so we're looking at ways to support congregations in moving into the justice side or strengthening their involvement in the justice piece of their work. So happy to chat with folks and continue to make connections on that work. It's really exciting to me to have both Cheri DiNovo, who's a member of our provincial parliament, and John McKay, who's a member of our federal parliament, here with us today. Both because they are sitting politicians who have a breadth of experience and understanding of what it is to have people come knocking on their door with particular concerns or interests, but also because they come out of a faith base and they have both found ways to continue to connect with the faith communities through the work they do. So you'll see in your biographies that Cheri is a United Church minister and has been the MPP of Toronto Parkdale since 2006 and is well known within our community here in Toronto and beyond in Ontario as a progressive social justice-minded minister who favors the issues of marginalized groups, including poor and people with mental health challenges, and invites them into the mainstream of our Christian life together. And she's carried that into her life as a politician and is a strong advocate on, there's a short list here, but is a strong advocate on a number of things, including minimum wage and affordable housing. John McKay is the MP for Scarborough-Guildwood and has been very involved in the reduction of global poverty and wants to hold Canadian gas, oil, and mining companies to higher ethical standards when they are operating abroad. And previously was the moderator of Spring Garden Church. He's deeply engaged with questions of politics and faith, and is the vice president of CEDO, which is an organization devoted to community banking in developing nations, and of course has been involved in a number of positions within the legal community. So we're going to invite John and Cheri and John to come up to the front and to join us, and to just say that what have we said to them? We've invited them to come and to speak specifically to us about sort of effective advocacy strategies, effective ways that we as advocates can connect with our politicians, but also to share with us a little bit of what it is in their own sense of faith that inspires them to do the work they do in the way that they do it. And we're going to follow essentially the same format as we did this morning, so that be able to speak for 15 minutes, and then the second one of you will speak, and then we will pop a question, and then have you respond to that, and then we'll move into knee groups and have a chance to chat as well and have a little bit of interaction. So that's our plan. Oh, I'm getting handed the signs. So just to know that I will lurk at the back and be able to give you the opportunity to know where you are in the timing process. So, do you have a sense of who would like to go first? Whichever one. Usually federal goes first. Federal. All right. So thank you, John.
Last time I popped a question was quite successful, actually. 25 years later. Please put that question on. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I particularly appreciate Mishka's efforts to do this. Mishka has been lurking around my office for what, 2 years now, and we've been able to, how should I say, help him discreetly on the scene, on the political scene in Ottawa. I'm going to try not to be as partisan as I normally am, which probably I will fail at. So please forgive me, I'm one of the last freestanding Liberals between here and Kingston. not really good times these days. So I thought that I would divide my remarks between the prophetic and the pastoral, and wind our way through pluralism. Doesn't that sound like a three-point sermon? Yeah, 3 P's. Right? Prophetic, pastoral, and pluralism. So I think that the first point I want to make is that if you're going to get in this game, you better have the courage of your convictions. It's a serious, serious game. And I noted the question about giving up your tax status, well, in the previous session. You may not have that choice for much longer. I participated in a conversation in iPolitics, which for those of you who are really groupie know that iPolitics is an online daily publication of a variety of articles. And over the course of the summer, I took issue actually with Lawrence Martin about Mr. Harper's faith and the influence it has in politics. And I said to Lawrence that I don't know who's more disturbed, because most of the time I agree with you, most of the time you agree with me. And I don't know whether you should be more disturbed about that or I should be more disturbed about that. But nevertheless, on his analysis of Mr. Harper's faith in politics and the intersection of Mr. Harper's faith in politics, I thought he was dead wrong and said so. But the point but that actually led to another conversation, which I also wrote about in iPolitics, and that had to do with the defunding of various faith-based organizations. Those of you who know that I've put forward a couple of bills, one of which actually got the royal assent, the C-293, which was the Better Aid Bill. And the Better Aid Bill said that, one, if we're going to do aid in this country, we have to do it for the purposes of poverty alleviation. 2, it has to be consistent with international human rights standards. And 3, you actually have to consult poor people. Strong concept, you know. Aid for poor people, what a novel idea that would be. That is the law of the land. And those who are disturbed or concerned or viewing with some skepticism the embracing of the mining companies by CETA might bear in mind that this is the law. And so the success or lack of staying between the embrace of mining companies and CETA should go through that lens. And I would suggest to you that is a lens that is a profoundly faith-based lens. I, on the other hand, am given to skepticism these days, and I believe that the golden rule operates in all matters. It's my goal, it's my rules. Oh, isn't that the golden rule? And I dare say that if mining companies are putting out their gold, it may well become their rules. And therefore, NGOs, faith-based organizations, et cetera, might be a little bit wary of the embrace. I say that as a sidebar issue because I was actually onto another bill, another issue, which is in the course of doing C-300, which was the mining bill, which says a simple thing, which was if in fact a Canadian mining company receives money from EDC, Export Development Corporation, Canada Pension Plan, or expects consular services while operating abroad, that they have to be consistent with international environmental standards and international human rights standards. You know, whatever you do is whatever you do, but don't do it with taxpayers' money, is what it boils down to. We lost in a glorious sort of way, but we lost nonetheless. And interesting to me, or a sub-issue of that, is many of the supporters of that bill actually subsequently got defunded. I see some of them sitting here. Maybe you could have more luxurious premises if you hadn't been defunded. But it had to do with Mennonite Central Committee, Development and Peace, Kairos was one of the big ones, and let's see, I think there's a couple others. Canadian Council on International Cooperation, the Canadian Council on Social Development, etc., etc. And I was trying to take, I've gone 10 minutes, or I need 10 more minutes.
You have 10 more.
I have 10 more minutes, okay, good. When I practiced law, actually, a 10-minute speech was a long time. Now in politics, it's just warm-up. Well, so the argument I was making was that you're going to have the courage for convictions, because a lot of these organizations, which are doing very good work, have now been defunded, primarily, I believe, because they are contrary to the Conservative Party philosophy. We do not welcome news with this government. We don't welcome news, particularly news that is contrary to our own preset views. So, I was making the argument in politics that this is actually going to go deeper, and it's going to get to that tax status, which I mentioned earlier. So I expressed this opinion, and I put it out to several faith-based magazines, which was picked up, and I got this email in response, and it was, frankly, I was a bit stunned by it. Well, very well done, John. I'll keep it in the queue. I sent in this article. I'll keep it in the queue for right now, as I've just received an official, quote-unquote, reminder from Revenue Canada that our charitable status may be in jeopardy because of too much, quote-unquote, political advocacy, and that our, on the part of our publication, citing 6 different editorials and articles as evidence. Needless to say, we are chafing at this heavy hand of the Harper government and consider it a, quote-unquote, chill on speech. Welcome to Canada. So, if you're going to get in this game, you better be prepared and be persistent in it. Second point, if you're going to get in this game, you need to be persistent, practical, and prepared. How do you like this? 3 P's? After my game, I think I'm going to apply to be a minister. Must be easy. Persistent. This is not a game for those who are here for one issue, or are here for some section of one issue, or will last 3 months. It's 3 years. It might even be 30 years. I have a framed picture of Wilberforce on the entrance part of my office in Ottawa. Bear in mind, Wilberforce. Practical. A lot of you think you know what you're talking about. You don't. I'm here to tell you you don't. There are limitations on what politicians can do. There are limitations, jurisdictional limitations, particularly with respect to, say, justice issues. The government of Canada writes the criminal code. That's pretty well all it does. It obviously has, funding obligations, and it obviously runs the prison system. But as far as making changes to law, that's its limitation. Provincial folks actually have a lot more influence in the justice system than do we. And preparation. If you're going to show up at my office or any other MP's office, you better be prepared and you better know what you're talking about. Particularly if you are coming to a committee, say a justice committee, for instance, or a social affairs committee, I would recommend the Cheri DiNovo approach. The Cheri DiNovo approach was to know more than anybody else knew. And that's why Cheri was so very effective. And in fact, you could probably just set this whole model up as a Cheri DiNovo model, because Cheri was there day in, day out, and he had this wonderful way of being nonpartisan, but extremely persistent. So Cheri was, if you will, my hero as far as persistence, practical, and preparation was concerned. Third point has to do with going through the lens of pluralism. If you come to my riding, there is virtually no people group known to mankind that doesn't live in my riding. You pull off the 401, on the right-hand side is the Taiwanese Cultural Center, on the left-hand side is the Armenian Church. Go down past McDonald's, on the right-hand side is Global Kingdom Ministry, probably the one of the largest evangelical churches in all of the GTA. Across the street from Global Kingdom Ministries is Tamil Central. Further down on the left-hand side is a large mosque. On the right-hand side is a Hindu temple, and on the left-hand side is a Salvation Army. And I haven't even got within a mile of the boundary of my riding. So, I think you need to have that mentality of virtually no people group will not be, should not be represented. There won't be. You can't just sort of assume that you speak for them. For instance, you look at international conflicts. Syria, in Syria, it's Christian, Jewish, Shia, Sunni. Sri Lanka, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Christian. Those who argue, frankly, that religion is going away are living in another world. I know my constituents, their faith informs their views probably a great deal more than maybe those of us who are Christians would think. And finally, I just want to talk about pastoral. Those of you who live in the greater GTA will know that the Danzig shootings, and that happened in my riding in July. 2 dead people, 23 injured, and 200 people didn't see a thing. It's a very difficult issue. I have long believed that pastors, priests, imams, etc., are an underutilized resource. And I think that the faith communities have to think about their role in situations such as that. I've been, over the years, cultivated, if you will, the faith leaders in my community. And so it wasn't a big stretch for after the post-Danzig shootings to call them in and say, okay, we got great programs in our community. We got great facilities. We got great people operating, but that's not the issue here. That is not the issue. These people need pastoral care, and you folks are the ones that are the experts. And it was interesting for me. Here I am, a politician, saying to pastors, "This is what you guys should be doing," and you saw the hesitation. I'm busy. I got my homily to write. I got to spend my 30 hours putting together my sermon, etc., etc. Oh, what about it? People will think we're proselytizing. No, can't do that. No, under no circumstances. Well, will we just be doing the same thing that all the other programs are doing, etc., etc.? And I kept saying to them, you folks have spiritual gifts. Exercise them. I know that you preach on a Sunday morning, or a Friday, or a Saturday, and you know what's going on in your folks. You're pounding out that sermon, or that homily, or that talk, or whatever, and you know what's going on. The only difference is that these folks live over here, and they're not likely going to darken the door of your church, or your mosque, or your synagogue anytime soon. But there's not a reason in the world, you can't knock on the door and say, how can I help? So, to bring that all back together again, you have a prophetic role. It is to beat up Cheri and me. I buy that. It will go through a lens of pluralism. And if you don't look pluralistic enough, you should. And you do have pastoral gifts. And please do not undervalue those pastoral gifts, because our larger society needs you desperately. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'm going to start off where he left off, I think. And first of all, talk about my own journey from, really from pastoral work, from being a United Church clergy person into politics. It's a weird leap, I know. I like to think on good days it was a call from God, and others that perhaps other forces were involved. But hey, here I am. And it's interesting that back in the days when I was in the pulpit, I was a theology head. I love theology. And I was one of those people who just lives and breathes it. And now I have to say in the world of politics that the corollary is ideology. And I want to uphold our system, really, in Canada, and the joys of it. There are all sorts of negatives, but the joys of it are that we are not a one-party system. I grew up in a household where 3 parties are represented at many faces around the dinner table, and that's a conversation in my head. That's one I'm used to. And that's one I think I value. So hence the role into politics has been, I'm known as the queen of the tri-party bill, which is the very first tri-party bill that was ever written in Canadian history that we're aware of, so correct me if I'm wrong, you historians, was to recognize the Holodomor, which was a genocide against Ukrainians by the then Stalinist regime in Russia in the 1930s. 10 million Ukrainians starved to death. And they didn't need to. There was lots of food around, it just wasn't for them. And we, all 3 parties, came together, we wrote that bill. Since then, all 3 parties at Queen's Park have come together and written many other bills. The last one being one that I tabled 3 times before on my own, called Toby's Act, that directly tied into my pastoral experience, which was about a trans person who was a member of our congregation, became our music director, Toby Dancer, a male to female trans person, and I wanted to memorialize Toby's life. Toby had died, tragic death. And I got all 3 parties ultimately in a minority government on the 4th go-round. We passed it in time for Pride. Christine Elliott, Flaherty's wife, signed onto that bill, and Flaherty voted for a similar federal bill federally. That, I believe, is the power of the pastoral. That's working together. Because ideologies, just like theologies, just like our various denominations, are important. For example, I mean, if you want to do broad strokes. So we have our conservatives, or progressive conservatives. Maybe you could argue they're not so progressive these days, but conservatives. Broad strokes believe that the free market system can govern itself. Broad strokes, that if you invest in large multinationals or Canadian companies, that investment will trickle down, create more jobs, create more wealth, create better conditions for those at the bottom. Social Democrats, New Democrats, on the other end, believe that if you invest at the bottom, that money will trickle up. That if you put money into the poorest pockets, that they'll spend that money, that will help the economy, and that will start things rolling. And this is for my friend over here. And the Liberals, they believe whatever and whoever they're running against. In the middle. The joke was, for Liberals, is we have principles, and if you don't like them, we have some others. Gotta get that one, just trigger. So some other bills that have been introduced using the same premise, $10 minimum wage, that was my bill, first bill I introduced, gave 1 million Ontarians a 28% raise. Worth doing, absolutely. The leap from the pulpit to politics for that alone. That eventually got picked up by our Labour minister in the Liberal government and put into place. Again, working together, building a campaign to make it so. Also, I'm working now on inclusionary zoning, which would add more housing. Again, got buy-in before the House was prorogued, and I'm sure that would have passed second reading. That would be reintroduced. All sorts of other things can be done that way. And so the advice to you as lobbyists is make sure you always talk to everyone. Because, you know, I don't want a one-party state. That's not what we want here. We want plurality. We want difference. You, sitting with your faiths and denominations, express difference. So bring that difference and speak to difference when you speak truth to power. Because that will aid. That will aid in what you do. When lobbyists come to see me who are kind of naturally left-leaning, for example, around housing and poverty issues, always make sure they speak to conservatives as well. Should be a conservative here, by the way. Speak to conservatives as well. because it's extremely important that you speak to them, and speak to them in a language that they can understand. I just gave you the broad strokes of what it looks like, our differences in ideology. So when you speak to a conservative, you're going to speak, you better have your figures ready, you better have the numbers in the palm of your hand. How much does it cost to give a $100 increase to those at the lower ranges and on social assistance? How much is the real cost? Know those numbers. How much does it cost to do new bills? I remind people that when I grew up in Toronto, and I was born in Toronto, that there was a conservative government in Ottawa, conservative government at Queen's Park, and a conservative government in the City of Toronto. And under those administrations, we built the gold standard of housing in Toronto, St. Lawrence Market rebuild. With mixed housing, co-ops, started with co-ops, had also government-built housing, and also, by the way, the tax base was way, way higher for the wealthy back then. It has been eroded over the years by administrations since. So, you know, we on the left love to throw logs at those on the right, and vice versa. But quite frankly, I stand here and say to you, the best way of getting things done is to actually, just like we preach, talk to each other. Actually sit down and negotiate with each other. That's the best way of moving the conversation and the agenda forward. Absolutely. Pastoral care. Here's something on the pastoral care front. Don't forget your politicians are human beings. They need prayer. They need pastoral comfort. One of the nicest things that happens in my office is once a month, a lovely evangelical lady who sees it as her ministry comes, sits down, and prays with me. And prays for me in my office. That's all she does. She goes from MPP to MPP around the building and prays with them. Now, do we disagree on almost everything, both ideologically and theologically? Absolutely. Doesn't stop her. That's why she's there. Let me tell you about the life of a politician, and having lived the life of clergy and politician, I can speak to this. We work 12 hours a day. That's on a good day. I run from here to 3 other events, actually 4, until my day's finished. John, I'm sure, does the same, and he puts in more miles, right? We work extremely hard. No politician does it for the money. Never. He's a lawyer. You think he could make more in private practice? I work with lawyers who could make way more and work no more in private practice to make what they make as a politician. Everybody does it from some innate sense that they want to make a change and a better change in the world. And when you speak to them pastorally, you speak to that person, the person that wants to make the world a better place, from whatever ideological place they come. You speak to them as a human being that often feels extremely powerless in their surroundings. To get something done, I and John have to convince, first of all, our own party, our own caucus, our own leadership, and then they have to go into battle with the other parties and their leadership. We have to negotiate behind the scenes and in the scene. We have to convince you and all of our constituency to get on board. It's a phenomenal amount of work. The $10 minimum wage took place across Ontario. We got the entire labor movement involved in that campaign, and everybody. It was a huge and costly campaign just for that one issue. You know, I always say it's a little bit like pushing an elephant uphill to get something done in politics, and occasionally it budges. And a crusty old Tory at Queen's Park then turned to me and said, and occasionally it shits on your head. That's politics. That's what it's like to be involved in politics and to do politics on a daily basis. So when you're speaking to politicians, you're speaking to somebody overworked, probably underpaid in light of what they could be making in the private sector, and who's there for all the right reasons, even if you think they're doing all the wrong things. So you speak to them on the basis of their humanity, as human to human, as pastor to potential congregant. That's a critical role that I think the church has not done, especially the left of the church, the social justice advocacy wing of the church, hasn't done as good a job as our evangelical brothers and sisters on that. They see that we're in need. Sometimes you don't. So speak to the human, pray for the human, pray with the human, and cut the human a little bit of slack. because that's who we are at the end of the day. We're just human. My husband always has a line before every campaign, and I in my 7th year of serving and had run 3 campaigns, I feel like an American, in that 7 years, and every time we start a campaign, he said, and worst case scenario, you win. But he's only half joking, right? I mean, it's a hard road. And I do it because occasionally we do push that elephant uphill, and occasionally we do get something done. And when we get something done, boy, the angels sing. The Hallelujah chorus, you know, unveils. I mean, Toby's Act, 4 times tabled. First time the Human Rights Code has been changed since 1987. Man, human rights, that's why I'm there. $10 minimum wage, that's why I'm there. Inclusionary zoning passes or any of the other bills that I've got on the order table, that's why I'm there. But it's a long, hard road to get it there. When it changes life for everyone. Yeah, so pastoral, absolutely. And the other thing to remember as well, and we need to be reminded of this, because there is an addictive quality to politics as well. This is the addiction. You know, you ask, well, why do politicians do it? It pays less than the private sector. You work harder than I did when I was clergy in a downtown big church. Why do you know, what is the payoff, the personal payoff? And I'd say that what politicians tend to get addicted to is that 5 minutes of fame. That 5 minutes of fame. It's very hard when there's a microphone in your face all the time to suddenly walk away and disappear, right, from that. So not only are you dealing with somebody who's overworked, who has all the right intentions, even if they're doing, in your estimation, the wrong things. Sounds like a congregant. But also somebody who probably needs some help. You know, needs some help with this addiction that we all share of wanting to be loved and liked, wanting to be known for who we are, wanting people to see us as we think we really are, and fill our needs. Hey, clergy never think that way. So again, that's the human being in front of you when you come before them. And the final thing, and I know I'm running out of time, the best lobbyist I know is on social assistance, is a trans person, doesn't have the means, but has the time, and made it her point to visit every single person at Queen's Park around Toby's Act. Got me on board early, was ready to be on board, of course, and she didn't spend a dime. She didn't spend a dime. What she spent was her time and her effort. And we all knew at Queen's Park that we would never see the end of her until that bill was passed. Way, way better than shrimp cocktails and free booze, which is the normal way wealthy lobbyists, do business at Queen's Park, and I'm sure in Ottawa as well. Way better than that, just persistence over and over and over again to every single person who had a vote until everybody knew her name and nobody would say no to her finally. That's the way. And she did it exercising all of those wonderful attributes that John and I have been talking about. And that is not only prophetic, but absolutely pastoral. She cared, even though I happen to know she's a card-carrying member of a political party, she absolutely cared about everyone she met with and understood their role as both human and politician. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for what you're doing. Rock out.
Well, and I thank you both because you certainly broke my political stereotype of always saying more than you've been asked to say. So thank you for abiding by our time, because we're trying hard to make this a really opportunity for interaction. When our two other panelists were up here this morning and we're talking about some of the ways of engaging the issues, when they were finished, they were asked what were sort of 3 key things they would say about advocacy, but you've covered that. So I guess the question I have, just for the two of you to maybe respond to in a bit more of an informal way, If there was one sort of moment or inspirational time that you say, that you reflect on or could describe in terms of what grounds you, what piece of your faith, what experience grounds you in this work that you do, that might offer a bit of an inspiration to those who are gathered here. And then just so you know what your next step is, we're going to kind of hear from them, and then we're going to follow the same pattern we followed this morning, which is to pair up and to think about what was the sparkly moment, what was the key thing that caught your imagination in what John and Cheri shared with us. And the second question was, what difference will it make in your ministry or work? And then we will gather back with them to ask them some questions as well. So we'll continue this iterative, I can't say the word. So, who would like to share with us?
Thanks, Beth. I immediately thought of one, so obviously it's the one I should share. And that was when I first ran, and John would probably ring with this, your campaign manager never really tells you the truth, otherwise nobody would ever run. The election was grueling. It was in many ways hellish, quite frankly, for my family and others. I mean, I won't go into the details. Suffice to say, it was a hellish campaign. I was feeling like I'd made absolutely the wrong decision, didn't want to face another day. Popped back into my church. I was out, I'd taken a leave of absence, but it was still my church. Popped back into our evening service, which was a service for those who mainly were on social assistance. It was a service that was built around a meal, common meal together. So people who had mental health and addiction issues, and most were on social assistance. And I was just chatting to somebody I knew there who was addicted to crack and who lived on the streets. And he hadn't really said much in the years that we worked together and knew each other. But he said, so how's it going? And I just happened to tell the truth. I said, it's awful, absolutely awful. And he said, why? And I said, well, there's this whole smear campaign against me, blah, blah, blah. And he turned to me and said, he paraphrased, because he wasn't a verbatim biblical scholar. He said, blessed are you when they speak ill of you. Blessed are you when they curse you. Blessed are you. And I immediately, tears came to my eyes, as still do, it was very clear that I was in the presence of Christ. Those presences of Christ are why I do what I do. And they inspire me. I mean, I do what I do because Christ is behind me, before me, above me, around me. And when, at my moments, that I question what I'm doing, Christ always appears and speaks to me. That was one of them.
Wow. So the question is, what grounds you? Well, when you're married with 5 kids, you don't need too much grounding. I remember Julie Van Dusen asking me something about how influential I was in the Liberal caucus. And I said, oh yeah, I'm really influential. I can't even get my kids to do the dishes. What was on CBC that night was, MP can't get kids to do the dishes. I wanted to echo one of Cheri's comments with respect to the people that come in and pray for you. As weird as that may be, as awkward as that may seem, it's very touching. It is very touching. I have my regulars, probably because I need more prayer than most. But nevertheless, it is very touching, and I truly, in this business, you've got a lot of people who want your ear, many who pretend to be your friends. I said to Justin the other day, I noticed that you've accumulated a whole bunch of friends you didn't know you had before. And that's kind of our life. But people that come in and pray for you, that's pretty special. And as to moments, I know some of you probably up there preaching on a Sunday morning or a Friday afternoon, or some of you possibly Saturdays. Must wonder whether you just wasted your entire day preparing this sermon. You didn't. some of the most settling times I have is on a Sunday morning, and there's nobody bugging me, and it's an opportunity for communion, literally, both vertically and horizontally, and those are very much grounding moments, and you sort of get a clarity. I find, at least, I get a clarity that I don't have in the rest of the week. So I would say those would be three grounding incidents.
Thanks. So what we're going to do now is in partners, and as Mishka said, in an emergency you can have a trio, but just to turn to one another, and again, what captured your imagination, what caught your attention in what either Cheri or John said, and what difference will it make in your ministry or your work outside of here? And we're going to give that, what, about 7 minutes, 10 minutes? And then we'll use Mishka's chime again. And then we'll come back and we will have an opportunity for questions and any other additional reflections that Cheri and John can share with us. So find your partners and engage in some wonderful conversation.